everybody ready here? Good evening. This is the Town of South Windsor Plan and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. We'll rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I would ask you to follow my example and turn the sound off on your phone. So we have a public hearing on coming up, but first I would just mention that one of our members, Bob Bathiri, is out tonight, and the alternate, Atif Qureshi, will sit for him if we do make any votes. Now, an alternate in any case can participate during the public hearing without limitation, so right now that's just a minor technicality. So I would ask the secretary to read the public notice.
Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Application 24-10P, Down East Text Amendment. Request by Down East LLC to add section 5.11, Gateway South Overlay Zone, or GSOZ, to create a new overlay zone, applicable only to the designed commercial, establish minimum bulk requirements for a minimum of 15-acre lots, add uses to Table 4.1.1A to include single-family frontage lots, independent living facilities, age-restricted 55 and over, duplex dwellings, multi-family dwellings to be permitted, subject to be allowed in the GSOZ and subject to special provisions. Add educational institutions for profit, municipal facilities and uses, large solar systems, warehouses, distribution facilities, and last mile delivery facilities in DC/GSOZ subject to provisions, and to add specific site and design criteria and requirements for retail and residential uses. Copies of the applications are on file in the office of the town clerk and/or the planning department and online at southwindsor-ct.gov/planning. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard, and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff at 860-644-2511, extension 2329. Stephen Wagner, Chair, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. So at this point, I think it's appropriate for the applicant to come forward. Let me, before you speak, I'm sorry, but the way we're going to run this hearing, the way we run all our hearings, is first we allow the applicant to make a presentation, then we hear from town staff. Tonight, in addition, we have at least one staff member, Dr. Carter, who is the superintendent of our school system. At that point, we will listen to members of the public. And by the way, we'll allow commissioners to question Dr. Carter so she doesn't have to stay to the end. And then we will allow members of the public to speak in any order. If you do speak, we're going to ask you to sign in and also verbally state your name and where you're from. And then after the public has had a chance to speak, we'll allow commissioners to speak. Now, in the interest that I want to make sure that commissioners do have a chance to speak, first of all, we're going to limit the members of the public, not including the applicant, to a 3-minute talk. And I will also cut off the public input at 9:30 so the commissioners can have comments and questions. Okay. The system works really well if the microphone is pretty close to your mouth. Okay. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Robin Pearson. I am an attorney with the law firm of Alter and Pearson in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Down East LLC. With me this evening are John Swaggerty. He is the Senior Vice President for Development of Washington Prime Group, of which Down East LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary. Down East is the owner of 56 acres of unimproved land comprising 2 parcels identified as 140 Pleasant Valley Road and 22 Wheeler Road in South Windsor, and as such is requesting the text amendment that is the subject of this hearing. Also with me this evening is Dr. Donald Poland. He has a PhD and is a member of the American Institute of Certified Land Use Planners, and he is also the managing director of the urban planning a group called Goman and York. So, the application before you is for a text amendment, an amendment to your zoning regulations to create a Gateway South overlay zone, which would be available only to owners of properties that are located in the Design Commercial Development Zone. Now, as it happens, all of the design commercial zones in South Windsor are currently owned by the applicant, Washington Prime as Down East, LLC. The purpose of the proposed text amendment is to incentivize investment into the design commercial properties by expanding development opportunities in those properties. A greater diversity of possible uses for design commercial properties makes sense as land use patterns in the area and within the Gateway District zone have changed over time. Economic vitality of the area truly begs for some additional flexibility in the scheme of development opportunities. And while you listen to our presentation this evening, it's very important that you keep in mind a concept which I'd like to underscore for you now, and that is that the text amendment proposes an overlay district, an overlay zone. In and of itself, it does not change any existing zoning as it exists on the land in South Windsor currently. This overlay option, should it be approved, still provides this commission with all of the policy prerogatives that you currently have in deciding any zone change, text change matter, which is characterized in land use jurisprudence as a legislative function. In deciding legislatively, which means in deciding text changes, changes in zoning of property, or whether an overlay zone should be landed in anywhere in town, that is a legislative duty of yours. You have total discretion as to whether or not a text amendment should be approved, whether a property should be rezoned, or whether an overlay zone, once it's been created, should land somewhere in town. No one can take that away from you. No one can say you have to approve it. When somebody brings an overlay application to you, you have total discretion. It's a policy issue, and that's a point we want you to keep in mind. So what that means is the same total discretion you have with regard to adopting this text amendment tonight, you will also have that same kind of total discretion in deciding whether or not, should you approve the text change or the text amendment that you have in front of you, you have total discretion as to deciding in the future, when a plan comes before you, whether or not you should allow that plan, which will then be the overlay zone, to land somewhere in town. In this case, it would be on a design commercial piece of property. So I'd like you to keep that in mind. There is no plan of development in front of you this evening for this site. All this will do, should you approve this text amendment, is to provide us with the opportunity to bring something in front of you for your discretion, for your decision, over which you have total authority and jurisdiction to decide whether it's applicable or worthy of approval for a particular site. So, we're going to begin our presentation with John Swaggerty addressing the history of efforts to develop these design commercial properties under the current zoning, which has been attempted through the decades now, at least 3 decades, which in all prior initiatives and efforts to do something with these properties has faced much opposition and has not ended up in the successful opportunity for development of the property. He will then be followed by Don Poland, who will present the specifics of the text amendment and discuss the many reasons why we believe the approval is needed to provide the flexibility to finally develop this property in a way that will override the handicaps that the owner of this property currently faces. So with that, I'd like to ask John Swaggerty to come on up and give you a little bit of history about the parcels that they own.
Hello, members of the commission, and thank you, Robin. Thank you all. You can hear me, okay? Hello, members of the commission. Good evening. Thank you, Robin, for the introduction. Thank you all for allowing us to speak tonight. My name is John Swaggerty. I'm the Senior Vice President for Development at Washington Prime Group. I'm here tonight on behalf of Down East LLC, the owner of the parcels at 22 Wheeler Road here in South Windsor. I've got this presentation here that I'm going to talk through, and for that I need to see. So again, I want to reiterate to you, the commission members, as well as the audience, that we are here on behalf of a proposed zone text change to create the Gateway South Overlay District. We are not here, there is no development plan that is proposed for the property that is the subject of the public hearing tonight. We want to make that very clear. This would simply create a zoning district that could be applied to the parcel at a later date that would be the focus of a plan. And that is important because it feels to us that the next step here would be to establish a pathway for development here by establishing the zoning district and then working with the community on a plan that people can support, that is market viable, and that brings amenities and benefits to the town that may outweigh any cost. That is very important. That is the sort of next step that would occur after the establishment of a zoning district that could accommodate a variety of uses, high quality design, and the oversight and review of the Planning Commission. I think we're all familiar with the location of the property. It's shown here on this plan on the screen. And what I was going to focus on tonight is to respond to certain comments and questions that were raised by the commission about the history of the site and why it is that it is zoned design commercial, but only for sort of a piece of it in the back with a shopping center developed in front. Remember, I can go back to this, that my company owns the plaza at Buckland Hills, the power center on the front of the property that fronts Pleasant Valley Road and is in the town of Manchester. We also own the parcel behind it. Sorry? So I'm going to speak to some history tonight. And the first thing is that we reviewed files, we viewed historical files from the town. And the first thing, we saw was that the parcel had always been owned together, the vacant land plus the shopping center. The site is currently zoned design commercial, and we can see through the review of the documentation that there have been numerous attempts in the past to entitle and develop a commercial project here. But those efforts were consistently opposed by the town and by the community. Those proposals stalled, and they ultimately died in the face of opposition several times. Starting from the very first zoning application was made in 1979 by the owners of both of these parcels to rezone them from rural residential to design commercial. Initial applications were rejected by the Planning and Zoning Commission. It took until 1985 the site was even rezoned to design commercial. After that, a plan was floated to build an enclosed mall on the property around the time that the property was rezoned in 1985. However, a neighborhood association filed a lawsuit to challenge that rezoning that had been granted. And this challenge ultimately worked its way through the courts in Connecticut, but in 1988, an appellate court upheld that rezoning. But by then, it was too late for the mall. The mall developers had moved to the site where the shops at Buckland Hills is currently, the mall up in Manchester. So the plan for the mall was abandoned on this property around that time of 1988. But soon after that, the developer of both of these parcels approached both towns with the plan that looks similar to what you see here, an outdoor shopping center, sort of power center with similar large anchors in the front parcel and in the back. That back piece also contained a future phase, if you were to see it, that included some residential here and a flex office space here, okay? That was in 1989. Around that time that an application was made, the Planning and Zoning Commission at that time indicated to the owner that a rezoning was necessary. The owner maintained that rezoning was not necessary. They were consistent with what was outlined in the design commercial district, and ultimately brought a lawsuit to challenge that position. In the paperwork, it's clear that the town settled that lawsuit and agreed to review the merits of the application. But that review took years. It took at least 4 years into 1993, by which point the town of South Windsor was still reviewing and commenting on the application, but the town of Manchester had already approved the shopping center on their parcel and construction had already commenced. At that point, we understand that the developers had missed the market and the application had taken too long, and the application did not move forward for the plan that we just saw. Fast forward a few years into 2007, and the owner of both parcels presented another development plan to the town of South Windsor, this time looking consistent with what you see here. A large format retail and some anchor boxes along Wheeler Road. And the story here, as you can see from the documentation, that this also faced significant opposition from community groups. Neighbors, petitions, other objections were raised. The parcel owner revised and refiled their application several times. Ultimately, the PZC did approve minor text amendments to the design commercial zone in 2009, but at that point, too much time had passed. The global financial crisis was upon the world, and the owner withdrew that application again. So, in conclusion, we do want to present that there have been attempts to develop the parcel for commercial in the past, but that opposition from community and the town prevented those proposals from moving forward, even though they were consistent with the zoning that was in place at the time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Don Poland.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Donald Poland. I'm with the firm of Gilman York Property Advisors, located in East Hartford, Connecticut. And I'm here tonight testifying on behalf of Down East LLC. A few points I'd like to start off by making is we don't have a development application before you at this time. The conceptual that we showed you on January 9th is not being proposed tonight. And we are simply seeking a pathway forward. Without zoning in place that would allow feasible options, we really can't bring anything before you. With zoning in place, we would be able to start a dialogue over potential development for this site. So we're simply seeking a pathway by establishing a floating zone, not an approval of a development. The zone, from our perspective, provides flexibility in use, density, and intensity, and it focuses on high-quality design that will allow us to create a development for the site that's market compatible and financially feasible. And to do this, we call this text amendment the Gateway South Overlay Zone. As you know from previous testimony from us related to the POCD, we do believe that there's a similarity between this area and the existing Buckland Hill Gateway, but there's also differences in the sense that it doesn't have the frontage on Buckland Road that zoning district does. So our approach was ultimately to create a zone that was similar in character and intent to the existing Buckland Hill Gateway, but also recognize the differences. So this regulation is narrowly crafted. It only applies to the design commercial district, and the design commercial district only exists in this location in the town. Therefore, if adopted, it will not have implications elsewhere in the community. The Gateway South Zone is both a floating zone. That means it will exist in your regulations only and not on the map. And it is also an overlay zone, meaning it can only be placed over the DC zone through a detailed application process that's stated in the text amendment. And that is why you as the commission retain your legislative discretion for any application under the Gateway South overlay moving forward. Basically, that process is a master plan would have to be submitted as part of a zone change application, a map amendment, to show and to ultimately get the approval from you what is proposed and can be developed on that site. So you retain that authority. You don't lose authority. We're not asking for as of right or even special exception or special permit processes here. We're retaining the legislative authority of text change. When considering an application for a text amendment, the commission needs to consider two key things. One is the comprehensive plan of zoning, and the other is the plan of conservation and development. The comprehensive plan of zoning in Connecticut is the zoning regulations and the zoning map as a collective document setting forth a plan for the future land use of the community, the future development of the community, pardon me on that land use statement. The comprehensive plan is about zoning. It is not about planning. I know similar phrases, they often get confused, but it is about zoning. Changes to a zoning district under the comprehensive plan, as explained through case law and so forth, should be reasonable in nature and should not drastically change the character of the district or area, nor should the changes be contrary to the reasonable expectations of property owners. And changes to the zoning must also reasonably relate to the police powers of government, your authority to protect public health, safety, and welfare. Land use law does recognize that communities change over time, and you as a commission have the discretion to make changes to your regulations and to your zoning map, provided they are reasonably related to those points I already made. We believe, it's my testimony, that the proposed text amendment is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development, and that a floating and overlay zone approach is consistent with your approaches to zoning. You have multiples floating and overlay zones established in your zoning regs already. It's a process you've used to address unique areas and specific kinds of development similar to this request. The use of the proposed Gateway South overlay zone, the uses proposed in the Gateway South overlay zone are consistent with existing land use patterns in the area surrounding the DC zone. These uses include mix of commercial, retail, hotel, office, multifamily, age-restricted residential, and other uses. And many of the uses already exist within the DC zone in the context of the regulation, not on the ground and developed, and will continue to exist within that zoning designation. The DC zone remains in place. It will not go away, and it is still an option. An applicant could come forward through the DC zone and never use the Gateway South overlay zone. And the master plan application to establish the Gateway South overlay zone on the zoning map means the commission will have another opportunity to consider the consistency of such a proposal with the comprehensive plan of zoning and determine its appropriateness. The plan of conservation should also be considered by the commission. However, strict consistency is not required. The commission has the discretion to either follow its POCD or not. It's an advisory document. So when considering such applications, you need to consider it. The POCD is a planning policy document and it's advisory. And when considering a proposed text amendment, the commission does not have to follow its own advice. Your POCD, as you know, we testified related to the POCD amendment. Your POCD does discuss this area both as 22 Wheeler Road and as the Buckland Hill periphery. My apologies.
Excuse me, did you want to change it? Yeah, okay.
Yes. My apologies for that. Your plan recognizes that the area contains one of the largest remaining undeveloped tracts of commercial zone land in the town and provides an opportunity for the town to grow the grand list. You also recognize its relationship or proximity to the on-ramps into this regional commercial area, and that it could support this sub-regional, could support sub-regional businesses, retail service, and other uses. And that zoning in this area should be evaluated to better integrate with the larger Buckland Gateway. And that's really what we're attempting to do, to provide an opportunity to evaluate the zoning in this area to better integrate with the larger Buckland Gateway area. And we think this proposed text amendment achieves that. My apologies from this point forward if I'm a bit dry, since I'll be speaking specifically about the text amendment, but I'll try and move along quickly. The first thing I want to make clear is we make amendments to table 4.1.1a, which is the permitted commercial and industrial uses. So there's specific amendments to that table that allows a variety of uses. They were already read into the record. But they include things such as single-family frontage lots, independent living, age-restricted, duplexes, multifamily residential, educational institutions, solar systems, large warehouses, distribution facilities, and last-mile delivery facilities. These are all existing uses within your regulations, and we just added them within this zone as special exceptions. I also want to make clear that we're listening to you. Things such as educational institutions, solar facilities, warehouses, distribution centers, and last-mile facilities were mentioned by this commission to us back in our preliminary discussion with you back in January, and that's why we have included them. So the purpose of this regulation, in summary, is to create an attractive and cohesive entrance to South Windsor that enhances the existing land use patterns of the area and further supports the commercial and economic development of Buckland Road Gateway Development Zone. Essentially, we want to try and establish a gateway here. To minimize the approach, the development, to modernize the approach, development style, and use of the DC zone while supporting economic vitality and mirroring the design aesthetic to the GD zone. We drew upon all the design elements with some minor modifications that were really kind of development specific within the GD, but we basically drew upon the GD for all the design elements. So, in the zone shall foster high-quality development with a careful attention to appearance, placement, and massing of buildings, integration of public amenities where possible, and professional landscaping. I'm now going to start speaking to some of the specifics. I just want to go through quickly the sections of the regulation. Beyond purpose, which was section 5.11.1. 5.2 is a reference to your existing definition section. We use your definitions in the
Could you give
regulation.
us a second to pull that piece of paper out of our
Sure.
stack?
Yes, sir, no problem. If you could just let me know when to proceed. Yeah. I'm just referencing the sections as I go through.
I'm ready. Is everybody ready to proceed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So 5.112 is definitions. We reference your existing definition section. We don't propose any new definitions here. Under 5.11.3, general concepts, we use existing provisions from the GD zone to require that concept plans be provided, that there be a pre-application process in DOT4, also drawing upon your GD zone. The permitted uses reference then the amended table, as I just discussed, 4.1.1a. We also reestablished that prohibited uses, if not expressly permitted, they are prohibited, a basic tenet of zoning. We establish a provision, once again drawing on the GD zone for consolidated parcels, recognizing that there may be the opportunity to develop this as one or more parcels, but to ensure that there's an integration of development across the site. The bulk and yard requirements also were inspired by the GD zone. We do a bit of a different minimum lot size than the existing DC zone with a minimum lot size of 15 acres. We put in provisions in that section to protect the existing berms that were previously installed on the site. We're basically committing to not disturbing those berms and making sure that they provided the protections they were initially intended to. There is a modification provision based on other parts of your regs for amenities. And then we establish maximum heights of 60 feet, 4 stories, and we reduce building heights to 45 feet and 3 stories within 120 feet of public right-of-ways. That is a provision already established in your zoning regs elsewhere, so we're trying to be sensitive to that. Site appearance requirements, specific site appearance requirements for retail establishments. These are separate sections, and specific site appearance requirements for retail establishments are drawn from, sorry, I repeated myself there, but section 5.1110 and 1111 are drawn from your existing gateway zoning regs. We're not trying to do anything new. There may have been some minor tweaks in language where those provisions referenced frontage on Buckland Road or so forth. We may have changed the name of the road, but the provisions remain intact. There's provisions for pedestrian and bicycle circulation. There's also provisions for buffers, drawing once again from the GD zone. Outdoor storage and trash collection, once again from the GD zone. And section 5.1116 also allows for drive-through facilities and drive-up facilities, also coming from the Buckland Gateway Zone. It's really section 5.11.15, requirements for multifamily and mixed residential use. That is the crux of this regulation, that establishes ultimately the flexibility we believe is needed to allow this site to proceed with development. It's based on your approach and your procedures already established in the Buckland Gateway Zone. It's modified to meet what we view as market feasible needs and to address unique site circumstances and allow a greater diversity in residential style housing. It restricts the percentage of unit types by number of bedrooms, no more than 50% two-bedroom or 15% three-bedroom. It allows for residential as part of mixed-use developments or standalone, and limits phases to 250 units, and no second phase could be started until at least 70% of the units in the prior phase have had COs issued to them. So it assumes a reasonable amount of time between phases. On mixed-use development, it maintains a ratio just like the GD zone of 2:1 residential floor area to commercial. It requires a minimum of 12.5% affordable housing, affordable units at 80% median income with 40-year deed restrictions, similar to provisions already existing within your regulations, and then provides an incentive for greater affordability, 15% or more. The incentive on the development side would be to allow a greater number of two-bedroom units, up to 62% rather than 52%. And it ties to your inclusionary zoning provisions in section 2.24. Along with the phasing, it also requires surety, a method that you use already in your regs. As I already stated, it limits residential units to 250 per phase. It allows 6 units per acre, which is consistent with other multifamily developments already allowed within your regulations, but allows 8 to 12 units per acre if at least 40% of the units are age restricted. That recognition of the difference between age restricted and non-age restricted, and that a higher percentage or a guaranteed percentage of restricted in order to go to higher densities. For mixed-use developments, every 1,000 square feet of commercial space will count as one residential unit, meaning the density yield on the residential side is reduced by the amount of commercial space.
What paragraph is that in?
Sorry?
What paragraph?
Ooh.
We're talking about pages 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, give me one moment. Section, pardon? Yeah, it's page 9, item F, bottom third of the paragraph, I believe. I'll read it for you. Each 1,000 square feet of gross commercial floor area should count as one dwelling unit when calculating residential unit yield. For example, a 20,000 square feet of commercial would provide, commercial were provided in a proposed mixed-use development, the maximum residential yield would be reduced by 20 units, 1 unit per 20,000. The idea is not trying to shoehorn maximum yield into a site. Therefore, And also just trying to clarify density. Density for commercial is often addressed differently than density for residential. I wanted to be clear in what we were asking for. As other provisions in your regs already require 750 square feet of open green space per unit. That's not a conservation open space provision. That is a provision that requires that there be outdoor green space at a rate of 750 square feet per unit. Provides a parking ratio based on actual need and demand, 1 space per studio, 1.25 spaces per 1 bedroom, 1.75 per 2 bedroom, and 2 spaces per 3 bedroom. And at this point, I'd just like to recognize we're thankful for the CROG letter in support, and also we're appreciative of their recommendation for maybe greater flexibility in parking standards, the idea of shared parking in the context of mixed use and so forth, and we are open to those considerations. We also use your EV space requirements in section 6.4.10. Infrastructure requirements remain the same as Buckland Hills Gateway. And it requires that if there's more than 100 units, that on-site amenities must be provided to lessen burden on town services, and requires that the property, if the property were to develop solely as residential, that a parklet of a minimum of 40,000 square feet be provided at the corner of Wheeler and, oh my, the word, Pleasant Valley, the street name was escaping me. And that such parklet should include trails, landscaping, ponds, 2 pickleball courts, and should also include gateway signage. Once again, we were listening back in January. I believe the prior chair, who's no longer on the commission, had talked about the importance of this location as a gateway. And we definitely agree with that, and we would want to make this as attractive as possible in providing that gateway signage. And the aim is to provide community facilities that lessen the burden on town services. Also providing building and design requirements, same as the Buckland Gateway, and also providing application procedures based on the Buckland Gateway and other requirements of the zoning regulations. Once again, just to note, if a zone change, if this text amendment were approved, it would require that any application moving forward under this text include a master plan as part of a zoning map amendment to place the Gateway South District on the ground at this location. Therefore, any application moving forward under this text amendment would maintain your broad legislative authority and discretion. Conclusions. You're finally done with me, unless you have questions later. Our request for the text amendment to create the Gateway South is narrowly crafted to only apply to the DC zone. The overlay zone is designed to simply create a pathway. We're looking for a pathway forward to engage the community in a process going forward to figure out what can work at this site for us and for you as the community. As I've said multiple times, it would still require your review and approval. This is not a request for a specific development or for certain uses. It is a request to allow us to move forward by designing a potential development application that balances market and financial needs and also the community's needs. The proposed text amendment is consistent, once again, with the comprehensive plan of zoning and with the plan of conservation and development. I thank you for your time. I believe Robin is gonna, Attorney Pearson is gonna sum up for us, and then we'll turn it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
I know you have a lot of people who are interested in speaking tonight, and I'm sure you have many questions for us. In conclusion, I just again want to underscore that you are not making a decision that would affect this property specifically if you are to approve this text amendment. Again, you are just providing an opportunity for us to engage with the community, engage with you, and come forward with a possible plan, master plan for your consideration. And only after you found such a master plan with all the conditions and requirements that you would deem fit to be able to have it first comply with the new text amendment and to meet the concerns that you or the public may have, only then would you be in a position where, using your full authority to make a legislative decision, decide whether or not that plan should land on the property. Only then have you made any kind of commitment as to what can actually be built above and beyond the current design commercial standards on the property. So with that, we welcome any questions that you have, and hopefully you'll look favorably on the application. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll hear from our Director of Planning, Michelle Light.
Thank you. So this is a request from Down East Associates, the owner of the land zone design commercial, to add section 5.11 Gateway South Overlay Zone, to create an overlay zone, and also to change some of the uses in table 4.1.1A, which are the current uses in the design commercial zone. I handed you all my report. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but there are a couple things I'd like to highlight for you tonight. So really we have two things going on here in the red line text that you received. They're adding the Gateway Overlay South Zone as well as changing the permitted uses, so those are redlined in the text that you received. You also received the narrative from Dr. Don Poland explaining the request, a lot of which was covered here tonight. Again, they're looking to create something similar to the Buckland Gateway Zone, allowing for greater diversity of the potential uses, and they've included a lot of site design objectives, standards, including walkability, open space requirements, and a whole litany of things that we kind of just reviewed tonight. One of the things I just want to point out about the uses in the table being proposed, things like the warehouse use and the last mile delivery, there is some caveats to those uses where they do not have to comply with Section 7. And Section 7 is that warehouse section that we just rewrote. So some of those uses, I just would make sure that you're looking at some of the caveats that are included with them or the requirements that they're not having to meet if we do consider those types of uses. To try to help the commission understand this text amendment, you should have all received the chart. This was a chart I provided for the applicant too. And essentially what the chart did is take a lot of the existing zones that we have in town, a lot of them which are like overlay zones or other commercial zones where we do allow for residential components, and I kind of try to break down for you what the current picture looks like as far as permitted uses, any special provisions that might exist, things like the affordability requirements that we have in other zones, open space requirements, how many units per acre, and kind of the bottom line, what I gave you too, is how many of these zones have actual construction in them. So for example, we have quite a bit of residential construction that's happened in our Buckland Gateway Zone between the assisted living, independent, and the apartments, whereas our town center village district zone, we don't have any residential constructed yet. However, there are provisions for it. So this was just to try to give you a point of comparison, looking at the multifamily that was being proposed with what we currently have existing in town. The other piece of information that I submitted to you was a chart that I compiled from a variety of sources, and I thank Marlene Poulet in the business office at the school. She provided me with the latest count of school children coming out of our different condominium complexes in town. She did caveat it that it changes daily, so we can only take it as a real snapshot. But I gave you the number.
Could you give us a second to find our copy?
Okay, sure.
There's an awful lot of paper here.
It's a single page titled South Windsor Residential Condos Apartments.
Yeah, I know, I saw it. Yeah. I think everyone would like to follow along with you on that. I had it 20 minutes ago. All right, we'll follow, we'll share it. Yeah.
So
Okay, go ahead.
the purpose of this chart really was to let you see our current condominium apartments that we have, how many units are in them, how many school children are coming out of them, and kind of coming up with that ratio, because we often have a developer tell a ratio of what to anticipate coming out of multifamily and different kinds of housing. So this is some real data for you to be able to see. I think the superintendent will probably highlight that, but South Windsor Woods, I think, is the top with a 1.01 ratio factor. The last column in here, again, was just informational. This came out of the SLAM enrollment report, kind of showing you how many kids they projected, and then you can see the other number of how many we're anticipating based on what the school gave me. So again, just another piece of information for you to have when you're considering this regulation. So the other thing I just wanted to bring your attention, so this is modeled a great deal after our gateway development regulation, particularly as it relates to the mixed-use kind of style, a village-style kind of development. So if you recall, in our gateway regulation, we had a 2-to-1 commercial to residential, residential to commercial ratio that we allowed. So in other words, for each 100,000 square foot of residential, you had to do 50,000 of commercial. And that's what the ratio is it's talked about in the regulations. I would point out, though, there is a provision that they don't have to do a ratio. In other words, they do have a caveat that they would do a 2-to-1 ratio, but they also might have a project that was strictly residential. So that's just something that you should note within the regulation. As indicated, it does provide, provide for a variety of different types of housing, you know, from garden style, semi-attached, townhouses, cottages. As I said, I think they don't have a specific plan, but they're kind of suggesting that anything might be proposed. And they do have densities going from 6 units to acres to 12 units to acre, again, depending on the type of project being proposed. We just adopted our plan of conservation development. It went into effect actually Sunday, July 21st. As you recall, 2 weeks ago when we did adopt it, there was quite a discussion about this particular piece of property and how it should appear in the plan and what kind of wording we wanted to associate with it. So I'm going to read the final wording just for the record so that we have it on record. It says, the Buckland Periphery area is located along Wheeler Road and Pleasant Valley Road. This area contains one of the largest remaining undeveloped tracts of commercially zoned land that provides an opportunity for the town to grow its tax base. Due to its location to the interstate highway system in the Buckland Hills area of Manchester, this area is anticipated to support regional-oriented business, retail service, and other uses that complement the offerings in the Buckland Road corridor. Zoning in this area should be evaluated to better integrate this area with a larger Buckland Gateway area and potentially support a more incremental, piecemeal approach to development. The corresponding land use map show this area as one that needs further study. So just some last comments about zoning text amendments here. This is a time when we want to consider the potential impacts on existing town services, existing utilities in the area, and we want to look at the difference of residential versus commercial developments and what different kinds of issues we may have one versus the other. I did have several staff members review this, and Justin is going to provide some comments for you when and my comments, we have Recreation, Human Services, something from sewer, and then the superintendent's here also to speak about the schools. And then the last comment is we do always consider traffic impacts with any kind of zone change requests, so that would be something certainly as this moved forward, if we did go into where you were looking at placing this overlay zone on this property, certainly a full-blown traffic study and considerations would come at that time. There are some provisions in the regulation for access management, which again, we would look closely to see that is incorporated with any design plans. There are no engineering comments at this time, so at this time I'm going to let Justin read the CROG report and some other staff comments, and be glad to answer any questions the commission has. Thank you.
So our assistant planner, Justin Rousseau.
Thank you. Dated May 21st, 2024, from Jennifer Bardis Early and William Rice of the Regional Planning Commission. The staff of the Regional Planning Commission of the Capital Region Council of Governments has reviewed this zoning referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of the neighboring towns. Capital Region Council of Governments staff commends this effort to provide a pathway for more dense and mixed land uses to be developed in appropriate spaces. This will allow for a more sustainable future with the potential of creating viable community centers, induced pedestrian activity, and missing middle housing. One note would be to consider phased parking plans or shared parking for the parking requirements section in this amendment. These are ways to more sustainably use land while reducing the parking burden both in cost and space for the property owner. From Andrea Confrancesco, Director of South Windsor Human Services, dated Friday, July 12th, 2024. And I quote, "Hi, Michelle. The issue of the additional senior housing, not assisted living, is that they are all eligible for services, which means all of our staff are impacted. This means more renters' rebate applications, energy assistance, Medicare insurance counseling, the use of our food bank, etc. Then they can also come to the senior center for programs. We have wait lists for many of our trips and some of our exercise classes, but having more folks attending programs is not so much the issue. It is parking. We have some people tell us they are circling the parking lot multiple times to find a spot, and some are leaving because they can't find one or they can't park far away. This was before the splash pad, and now it's worse. Additionally, our transportation services are highly utilized with the requests for medical transportation, errands, and attending senior center functions. My concern is trying to find drivers with a CDL to meet the need, as this has been an ongoing issue. Also, our fleet of vehicles is in good shape right now, but we continuously have to stay ahead of the need because it can take 2 to 3 years to get a new bus because our options in purchasing buses are more limited now with the cost higher and less grant funds available. For example, a grant I wrote in 2021 for a new bus was approved and it has not arrived yet 3 years later, so we have been operating our services with one less bus. This is a memo issued by Tony Manfrey, Superintendent of Pollution Control, dated July 16, 2024. This is a summarized version of the memo. Staff have reviewed the zoning text proposal for changes to uses permitted in the design commercial zone. It is our understanding that, if approved, there is a potential for several hundred of new residential units in that area. Wastewater from this area is serviced by the Clark Street Pump Station sewer shed. It is important to understand/evaluate the limitation of the existing infrastructure to determine what impacts further residential development may have. With the development of the Buckland Road and Evergreen Walk over the last decade, along with vacant parcels of land inviting future large-scale projects, the available capacity of the Clark Street Pump Station is something for not only town officials to be aware of, but developers as well. In May 2019, Wright Pierce performed a pump station asset evaluation on all 11 of the town's pump stations. The Wright Pierce report summarized that the Clark Street Pump Station has 31% of its capacity remaining and recommended that the town upgrade the station and identify sources of inflow and infiltration. In conclusion, it will be imperative for the town, developers, and consultants to work together as future build-out of the town occurs. Data from the sanitary sewer evaluation will help identify the largest sources of groundwater infiltration. Understanding the remaining capacity in the pipes, pump station, and force main servicing future developments in the Clark Street Pump Station sewer shed will be instrumental in developing a project's scope and ensuring the proper management of its wastewater. Measuring forecasted flows against the sewer shed's infrastructure flow capacity should be a part of any development. Thank you. Apologies. A final note from Molly Keys, Director of Parks and Recreation, dated July 17, 2024, and I quote, "Hi, Michelle. I wanted to write a follow-up after reviewing this housing proposal submitting to PZC. The Parks and Recreation Department is committed to enhancing our community through high-quality recreation programs and parks. With that being said, we have reached a maximum capacity for the majority of our programs, including before and after school, camp, basketball, preschool, swim lessons, majority of open gym times, adult leagues, youth enrichment, etc. Our programs and events are extremely popular, and now we often have a large wait list we cannot accommodate. Adding additional residents would cause increased wait lists and a larger population that wouldn't have access to our programs. Childcare is a need for families, and they would not have the ability to join our programs. We also already have an increased need for gym space and outdoor athletic facilities, which means that with additional residents, those spaces would have even more limited accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rousseau. So,
That is staff comments, and then we'd invite Dr. Carter to come up and make her comments.
Dr. Carter.
Good evening, everyone. As P&Z members know, I was here on February 13th, and I gave a pretty comprehensive presentation on our enrollment growth, its impact on our facilities, and its impact on our operating budgets. So rather than repeat that presentation, the data has not changed since February. I did put in front of you as a guide some of the highlights that you may want to refer to from that presentation. So that one is marked July 23rd, and it just doesn't have all the slides from the February 13th presentation. But certainly the concerns and the dynamics that we discussed in February remain true. As you know, we are among the fastest growing school districts in the state of Connecticut. Our growth is an outlier. You may recall the famous map that I often bring, where we are the only town shaded in purple, which represents our town growing at a rate that exceeds a 10% threshold over a 10-year period, and no other town is in that category. And quite frankly, there's only 13 other towns that are increasing in Connecticut at the time of that study over that 10-year period. So we are an extreme outlier amongst outliers. Most people are flat or declining. We're among the very few that are increasing, and our increase is definitely at a rate that is not being seen anywhere in the region. So the concerns that I have are not new. You've heard them, and I do think that it's important to note that this community, and overwhelmingly an incredibly positive way, championed our investment in our elementary schools. And any additional, so this isn't a comment about tonight's, any additional high-density housing in anywhere in our community would require greater infrastructure. We could not sustain and incorporate the students that would be generated. As you know, I think you may have recalled, I coined the phrase the South Windsor effect. I know that sometimes the anticipated outcome of the number of students associated with certain developments have, again, been an outlier and exceeded expectations or projections. Notably, we discussed the South Windsor Woods, and if you recall, and it's in your packet, they originally thought it would generate 21 to 35 students. When I was here in February, I think the number had grown to 147. Now, since February, I can tell you we're now up to 156. I have shared, the only new particular slide that I shared in the July packet, which this is an anecdotal piece. It just kind of paints a picture. The three highest high-density housing areas in the PV district, and I'm just using PV as the example, are South Windsor Woods, Strawbridge, and the Mill River Meadows / Briarwood. And those high-density areas generate 156 students, 122, and 120 respectively. And I think as an anecdotal note, those represent 3 bus stops. Those 3 bus stops, just those 3, have generated 30 kindergarten students for Pleasant Valley this year. And so to put it to further point, that is why, literally as we speak, we are converting a instrumental music room into a kindergarten classroom, because we still have instrumental music, just has to go to a different place. But it's still, and quite frankly, anybody who's seen Pleasant Valley certainly isn't going to say, wow, that building is small. That building is huge, and even with that size and that infrastructure, we are students that are coming in. Like I said, I'm really happy to answer any specific questions or highlight something in that packet, but I know that it's been shared, and for anybody here that did not see it, the February 13th meeting is online, and you could get the information that I shared much more comprehensively that evening. I'm happy to answer any questions that commission members have.
Okay, so I'll let each commissioner, starting with Commissioner Willett, you have questions or comments?
Just a question. So if we use South Windsor Woods as our reference point with a little, just call it one student per unit, what would 640 students do to South Windsor's school system?
So I can't speak to the calculation, but if you're just asking me what would 600 more students do for our school system, well, if we had 600 more students, we would need another elementary school. And granted, that's going to be K-12, so it's not going to be 600 at one school. But presume that that's spread across K-12. We could not sustain with our 4 brand new, very large elementary schools, we would not be able to sustain. Our middle school is expected to get another 276 students over what it has today, and our high school is expected to get another 463. So among that 640, we'd be adding to those numbers. You can imagine that we could not sustain the growth we already have at the high school had we not had the good fortune of having the annex. And at TE, we're doing very creative things to accommodate. There's work that happened this summer with the cafeteria and various things. But 276 is going to be a challenge. But add to that 50, 100 more kids, we're really looking at more infrastructure. To build, I know it's a little unrelated to your question, but people are always asking me about a new high school. A new high school, brand new high school, would be to the tune of $200 million. And a large addition to TE would be, significant investment. So it would have an incredibly financially difficult impact with any sizable, in any location. I'm often asked about redistricting. Redistricting, you hear other towns doing that, but that's when they have an imbalance. So let's say they have 4 elementary schools and one's under-enrolled and 3 are overcrowded, they might redistrict more kids to that under-enrolled building. We're full everywhere, so redistricting is not really a solution for us because we're not under-enrolled in any one of our elementary schools.
And then beyond physical facilities, what would that do to head count for everything from teachers to, I think, more special ed, busing, after school, sports?
Significant. I think from my last presentation, we are one of the lowest per pupil expenditures in the state. So we are already as efficient as we can be. So any additional students is going to mean significant increases to our operating budget and our facilities budget. It's not just the facilities, as you know. Many people have asked me, well, would you build currently? This is not about under current conditions. I've been asked, do you think you should build another elementary school? My answer to that is no, under current conditions and current projections, because the expense that goes with a principal, a nurse, a custodian, all the staff, we really need a few more classrooms everywhere across our elementary schools, but I would not advise for, say, a 35 classroom building. Now, if there were to be high-density housing coming into the community in any area, we would be talking about a potential additional school.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dexter.
Just want to thank you, Dr. Carter, for coming to speak with us tonight. It's a lot of what we heard in February. And it's frustrating for the whole community. We had a year of no housing, a moratorium for a year. We have major turnover of homes, older folks leaving, and a family of 2 to 3 to 4 come in. We know we have to accommodate for them. which is why this is so difficult tonight. But thank you for coming.
I guess straight up, and how worried are you with this text request for amendment to this text?
And I'll say it even more generally, not only tonight am I concerned, but any high-density housing that would be proposed in South Windsor would have me extremely concerned. And it's not a matter of, oh, it would be difficult or inconvenient. We simply do not have the infrastructure. There's no way to squeeze in more kids in our current infrastructure. We are using every inch right now. So we could not, even if there was an appetite in this community to build more schools, which I am not proposing, we couldn't build those schools fast enough in response to the speed with which apartments or condominiums or other types of high-density housing can be built. And again, this community was very supportive and generous. They invested $162 million into elementary schools. And I feel that this community stepped up and invested, but it would be unfair, for lack of a better word, unfair to be asking this community to step up again when it's already made so many investments in our schools.
Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming forward with a presentation. You know, I've heard a lot about the presentation, that you've done it in front of the commission before. I think that was the one meeting I was sick, but I mean, we've seen these projections before, and I'm quite appreciative to see the figures in front of us, and even comparing it to the past few years, even when we've barely built any new housing developments, we've still found a way to increase the school population by almost 300 students since 2021. So it really shows that, you know, when we have a turnover of housing, you know, there's not much that we can do about it. So I really appreciate, you know, your comments. And even if we were to do senior housing, for example, of some sort of application, let's say there's a lot of families in South Windsor that live in a single family home that want to age in place in South Windsor, we'll move to that development. And then all of a sudden, those single family homes go on the market, and single family homes are more likely to produce school children. So it is a pressing issue, and I'm appreciative that you came forward with this.
Thank you, Dr. Carter, for coming in and sharing these figures with us. I think we've all been seeing the growth. One of the more challenging things for us is convincing the statewide numbers that everyone compares to South Windsor. They'll bring a development in and they'll say it'll add at most 3 students, but we don't see that. So this kind of helps, you know, I think put some perspective in, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So earlier I said I was going to ask you 4 questions. Some of them have already been asked. We saw in the proposal a mix of 1, 2, 3 and bedroom and studio apartments being proposed. Do we have any data that tells us that, let's say we just approved studios and 1-bedroom apartments, that we would not have the kind of impact that we would expect from some of these other multifamily developments?
I would definitely defer to planning on that question.
You know, there's no data, but what I can tell you is when we were doing our housing moratorium and we had put together a lot of information, what we found was there was only something like 33 bedrooms in the town. So, I mean, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms is what the bulk of our housing was in these apartments and apartment complexes. Very few 4 bedrooms. So that's the only data I can offer you on that. I don't know. I mean, that would be something that maybe they'd have to mine down at the school level. But again, most of these developments only have 2 bedrooms.
So, I mean, this is what happens when you have a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom, basically. Do we know, I mean, are the ratios typically 50-50 of each, or, you know?
I'd really have to research it. I know today, you know, in Evergreen Walk it is, in 175 Oakland, you know, that's kind of how our newer regulations are. Something like South Windsor Woods, you know, you actually have some single-family homes there. You have some duplexes as well as attached housing in South Windsor Woods, so you have a variety of housing type there. And then all the other projects, you know, are older, go back to the 80s. So I'd really have to dig into it if you wanted that information.
Sure, thank you. So you know, just from my experience with the bike program, I know we have students in our school system that come in from other towns, and it really enriches our school population and is a great regional service. But is that an area where we could sadly accommodate more students, or what would you say about that?
If you're asking whether we would reduce our partnership with our students that come in from Hartford, I think that's what you're alluding to. We could, and in fact, I have scaled us back. However, there's a significant revenue stream associated with that program, and there would have to be a larger conversation with the town council and the Board of Ed about if we were to intentionally reduce that population over time, how are we making up the difference in revenue? And we've been a proud partner of that program for 50 years, and so I'm not suggesting that that's the goal. However, it's a legitimate question, and it's really, I hate to say it, but at this point, it's a financial conversation about sustaining the loss of revenue as we reduce in numbers.
Mm-hmm. So how many students does that involve?
I think currently we have about 100 students across all grades.
Okay. What about the Creek School? Do they have vacancies that we could take advantage of or make a deal with?
Well, they may. However, it's parent choice if a parent wanted to sign up for a magnet school. In other words, we would not be able to, say, redistrict families to a magnet school. They would have to enter the lottery. We don't have significant participation in the magnet school, fewer than I think people would think because of its proximity. We do have some students. I don't have the exact number offhand, but it's not a significant amount. Now, in terms of their program, I don't know what space they have. I don't know if they're under-enrolled, but again, that's not something that we would control.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as we look for alternatives, places where there's an increase in cost, I mean, a development such as this would bring in more taxes, and presumably the town council could use those taxes to deal with some of these issues. But I guess it's really, I mean, we're just repeatedly convinced that we got a problem here increasing the school population. And it's kind of it's a good problem to have, but it's also disappointing in a way because we all of this commission really would like to see more affordable housing built. We recognize that we need to have more housing available for young people starting out in their careers, and it's just not there, but it's going to be very difficult for us to meet that need without causing some serious problems. So,
you know, Mr. Chairman Wagner, I wasn't, there's only one data point that I might repeat for, I think there's some folks here that this would be the first time maybe they're hearing it, and I think it really crystallizes how unique we are. We did a study of other Derby, Hartford area towns, and that includes, in addition to South Windsor, Farmington, Simsbury, Avon, Granby, Glastonbury, West Hartford, all very desirable school districts. And during the same 5-year period, this is the decline or growth in comparison. In that 5-year time period, West Hartford lost 534 students. Glastonbury declined by 286 students. Granby declined by 134 students. Avon declined by 111 students. Simsbury did grow by 24 students. Farmington grew by 42. South Windsor grew by 616. That's why I read it. I thought you would have. It's helpful. I just think it's helpful to show that we're just that unique. And I think that information puts it in perspective of, you know, why I was invited here, but why I'm here to share the concern. I think that's a very telling story. And, you know, enrollment is cyclical, and the next superintendent after me can be a hero because there'll be declining enrollment and things will look rosier, but not during my tenure. We are not slated. The piece that concerns me is we are slated to plateau at the elementary level. So right now, we can sustain the population that we have. It's tricky, but we're doing it. And we're designed to plateau. But between now and I think it goes up to 2032 maybe, there's no downturn. So, and then as you heard, TE and the high school are still going up. So the bubble of the newer families with younger children is moving through. And that's why you're seeing growth at TE and growth at the high school. That's why the budgets that you see me present are not asking for a lot of elementary teachers because we've plateaued. But we're gonna need more teachers at TE. We're going to need more teachers at the high school to accommodate these students. So it would be more comforting if I could see a downturn, but right now that is not, we will eventually. There will be a downturn, it's cyclical, but not in the near future.
So I would just ask if the applicant has any questions for Dr. Carter? Any of you? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, let me get we'll get the applicant, and we'll go back to see if commissioners have some other questions.
Okay.
For the record, Don Poland, we don't have any questions. Thank you.
And now, Commissioner Foley.
Kate, the applications that have been approved that are not online yet, are we ready to accept that construction? Such as the Geisler's Plaza, Deming?
Well, those that have been approved but not built, I guess ready or not, here they come. I mean, those are approved, so we will have to find a way. I don't know if
They've been accounted for in your projections for what that's worth, so the ones that are.
Okay, Commissioner Perossi.
So I don't want to have you speculate, Dr. Carter, but when the towns are in decline, is that because there's just no new students? People aren't moving in or out of the town? Like, what's the sign of a decline in a town?
So it would vary from town to town why you might see a decline. It is cyclical. Right now, I think I can better explain the growth in South Windsor than I can the decline in other places. But it really has to do with, we have a more varied housing than some of the towns that you heard me name in that Derby group. So by having more diversity of types of housing allows for more movement in. We are more accessible than the districts that are also viewed as highly successful districts, as South Windsor is, but we have a little bit greater access point for people in terms of the cost of housing and the availability of different kinds of housing. But as Mr. Cavagnaro mentioned, it's not just the new developments and the new housing, but we've also had a significant turnover in empty nesters leaving, and when they leave, the taxes that's associated with that house stays stagnant, and when they turn that over to a family with 3 children, now a new person and family is living in that home, only they are bringing children with them. So we've had some unique dynamics in South Windsor. Again, some of these towns that have had declining enrollment, they will likely at some cycle begin increasing again when their housing stock is in a different pattern.
Yeah, so we're in trouble regardless. Sorry to be obvious, but.
Mike, yes.
So I can give you a comment or an observation on Simsbury. The reason their enrollment went up is because of high-density housing. On the south end of Simsbury, at the old Hartford property, Hartford Insurance property, and in Ensign Bickford's Powder Forest area that it used to be part of their, they used to make bombs out there, but they turned that into high-density housing. And that has been the influx. That's why they're tearing Latimer Lane School down, and they're building a new elementary school because all of the kids are concentrated in the south end of town. So it does project what could happen here based on their experience. The other towns, like Terriffill, where I went to elementary school, they've had to redistrict to get more kids in there because the enrollment's down. So they're really just remapping the entire town simply because of high-density housing. So it would impact us. That's my experience.
Okay, any other comments or questions, Michelle? Oh, well, thank you very much. I know we've asked you to come and speak to us several times in the past. The message has been pretty much the same, but you know, this is such an important area of town, this new area, you know, hopefully new development area, that we want to just make sure we have all the facts. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we now would entertain comments from members of the public. Again, we'll give you a 3-minute limit, and we will, unfortunately, in order to allow commissioners to ask questions of the applicant, we're going to take comments from the public for about an hour, and then we'll be able to move into comments from commissioners.
Roy already signed up.
Good evening. I commend you for all the time and effort you put into this work that you're doing. Wonderful. You've heard it all, but I'll just kind of add my voice to the thing. So I'm asking you to reject the request for this overlay zone change to this 50 plus parcel. I understand that it's around 12% of our total commercially owned properties in town. Allowing residential development in a commercial zone, I think you've heard, approaches being disastrous. It would dramatically impact our already overburdened school system, as you've heard. Increasing our school population will increase our already high taxes. We need commercial development to help provide additional tax revenue. With the last revaluation, the taxes on my home went up 28%. This is mainly due to the assessment on residential property increasing at a much higher percentage than commercial, shifting a greater burden of the tax burden to residential property. So I urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you sign in, by the way, Roy?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Thank you. 1 second to get this map out. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Jackie Kaufman. I'm an attorney with Carmody, Torrance, Standack, and Hennessy. I represent the owner of 30 Longleaf Lane, which is the residents of Evergreen Walk, and representatives of that entity cannot be here tonight, so is that better? Okay, thank you. Residents, I represent the owners of 30 Longleaf Lane, residents of Evergreen Walk. Representatives of that ownership entity are away because of summer vacation, so they asked that I come here tonight in opposition to the application as it's proposed to you today. The proposal is broad. It proposes a broad range of new uses, and thank you very much for that chart, by the way. It's very excellent to have something that distills that. That was very helpful to us in evaluating it. But particularly, the broad uses include residential uses and especially multifamily uses. You've heard a lot about that tonight. I know that I don't want to take up your time repeating those, but these are too intense. They'll overburden the existing town resources and infrastructure without greater consideration to how to refine them in the definition. My client is property owner in Connecticut, throughout Connecticut, and particularly in this community, and it is a developer. I'm typically a developer's representative. So I only come to you with, and happy to speak with the applicants again after. And please forgive me, Robin, because I just got back from vacation again myself and was able to be here today. But the way it's drafted right now, it's going to compromise the measured and thoughtful development that this community, this board, and your
municipal partners have taken a long, long and careful time to craft. And it's not that it may not work. It's a really nice piece of land to be able to be developed, taking now what is roughly 60 acres, right, 56 acres. You have 30-acre increments under your current zoning, and now you are chopping that up now into quarters. So that could go in many different directions. And that does help a developer know what they can do and how to market it, and it's a really great tool to have a text that gives them flexibility. But without a master plan coming to you with the text, it's going to be very hard for you to control the outcome, especially given the infrastructure stress that you've just heard about and that you have been reviewing for many, many months. I also think, and if it's okay, just since we are taking up a short period of time, if I will email my specific thoughts to you, but I think that it is a missed opportunity for this commission to disregard its very, very brand new plan of conservation and development. Those plans by law are refreshed every 10 years. It's really more like 12 years by the time it gets published, but it includes community charrettes and a lot of really, really important information. And to disregard sustainability and resiliency, conservation, what the school-age population and enrollment requires, how you balance the development needs of the community with the impacts of the school system, housing needs with the capacity for town facilities. This goes on, and I do have about 10 or 15 different bullet points that I've pulled from your POCD. I'll put that in an email to you if you can include that in your record so I don't take up the rest of the neighbors' times here, the community's time. But really, this application right now doesn't sufficiently address how the development in the overlay zone won't stress these community facilities. And this is a great opportunity for development in this community, and you have an opportunity to make it great. There's been many, many good reasons, looking back at the history, as to why the plans were either rejected, opposed, or not right timed. And so this is a key and pivotal time. I think that
Can you conclude your remarks?
yes, I will. I'm trying to look at a few of these in here, and 3 minutes is tough for us lawyers. We can't stop talking, but I'll put the rest of my comments into writing. Thank you very much for your time. We always remain open to speak with the applicant and with members of your staff in refining it. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
And anyone else here wish to speak?
John Howazak, Cody Circle, 33-year town resident. I'll keep my remarks super brief tonight. Just wanted to mention that the applicant refers to the gateway zone as a sort of a basis for their application before you tonight. I distinctly recall voting on a resolution in the late 2000s regarding the gateway zone. I knew at the time that there were neighbors up on the hill off of Deming Street that were concerned that their view was going to be destroyed. But after a bit of research, I voted in favor of the gateway zone and its development because it was my understanding that it was going to be a purely commercial zone, pure tax income for the town. Unfortunately, it's undergone a lot of mission creep over the years. There was an assisted living facility put in, and then that kind of opened the doors to more housing. So I don't know if that's a really good basis for extending the zone into this one. Second thing, just, you know, I listened as carefully as I could to the remarks tonight. They mentioned 40,000 square feet of open space. Just a little bit of quick math, that's a little less than an acre for a 56-acre site. I think you'd be hard-pressed to even put in a park in such a small place. I'm sorry, not a park, a playground. Frankly, you know, I've always felt like the west side of town has been kind of shortchanged on parks and recreation. We have the pool, which is wonderful, but not a whole lot of parks and playgrounds on our end of the road. So, or our end of town. Anyway, I'm going to just sign in here and let somebody else speak.
Thank you, John.
Good evening. I would just like to emphasize and support
Excuse me, could you identify yourself and sign in,
Jeff
please?
Moline from Five Drake Court in
Jeff
South
who?
Windsor. Jeff Moline. I'd like to emphasize what was talked about this evening. I don't think we need new stores. Evergreen Walk has a bunch of empty ones. We don't need new apartments for seniors because Evergreen Walk is about to build theirs. We don't need other apartments because Deming Street is about to build theirs. So I'm hard pressed to know why we need to develop this land, which is in our neighborhood in South Windsor area, to have anything else there and on top of what was already given by the other people giving the testimony. We don't need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else?
Steve Gretsch, 155 Judy. Just a couple of comments on the actual, this application and plan of conservation and development. In the past, when that was spoken to, it was, this has nothing to do with that. It just doesn't make any sense to put this where it's going. But I keep hearing the word data thrown out, and when you look at the data behind the POCD, this doesn't match. Dr. Carter's comments match what we've been coming up as residents and saying for the past 3 years about the infrastructure just being thrown out the window. And then there were some kids, I believe, in the middle school or the senior high that actually did a survey, and that survey had more statistical validity than the actual one that the town did and presented to the residents, and I don't know how something like this would even come about with the POCD. So it's kind of blurred there what the whole POCD was when it wasn't statistically valid. It just doesn't fit here. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve? Anyone else here?
My name is John Wren, 195 Wood Pond Road. I think the biggest problem we've got is the educational system.
Could you bring the mic closer to your face a little bit? Okay.
The educational system is my primary objection to this effort. The Board of Education says the educational growth in South Windsor is the greatest challenge facing South Windsor, and I agree. What's happened over the past few years is that our town has gotten so great with our education system, everyone wants to come here. So it's growing like crazy. It's not going to stop. What's happening is the people who live here that are like myself, over 65, retired, are having problems with taxes, and we're leaving. And who's coming in? My neighborhood is 3 and 4 bedroom homes, 3 children with parents, 4 children with parents. So the growth in the school system is just going to increase. And it's not going to level out as it's projected. It's going to increase. And that's going to be our major problem. We've already got a request from you people, I believe, back in November to add in a portable classroom or non-portable classroom to the Pleasant Valley School. That's just the beginning of where we're stretching the schools to accommodate the kids that are coming into the school system. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Mark DeCiancia, 39 Debbie Drive. Lived here
Sorry,
for
I didn't catch your name.
Mark DeCiancia. That's with a capital D there for you. So at this point in time, I lived here for 67 years. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know what's going on here. The data is showing we're on a highway to hell. Everywhere you look in this town, whether it's going to the splash pad, whether it's going to the town hall to get an application, we're busting at the seams. When you look at a large pizza, it's got 14 slices. 12 of them go to education all the time. We're at a point now, there's only 2 slices left. How are we going to do and run this town on a general budget with more housing coming in this community? I just feel that we're on the state of Connecticut Democratic agenda more than we are about the South Windsor agenda. The South Windsor agenda has to be addressed, not the state of Connecticut with housing. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Wayne Kilburn, 291 Smith Street. I've lived here for 34 years. I'd like to thank the commission for bringing in other town departments to get some insight as how it affects them, from Parks and Rec, from the senior center, to the school system, and it really made me aware of all the aspects that you have to consider in making decisions like this. I appreciate your due diligence. I'm going to ask you to deny this application. Now is not the time to add the burden to our already stressed school system. Down the road, maybe, but don't do it to us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Anyone else?
Hi, Carolyn Carey, 215 Abbey Road, and I'm speaking as a resident. As a 21-year resident, I would ask that you not approve this text amendment. Today, the majority of our tax base is residential, which is one of the items driving the tax increases. South Windsor needs commercial industrial uses to help balance out our tax base. This text amendment is overly broad and including residents is not appropriate at this time for all the reasons you've already heard. I would love to see us develop this area. I think other towns have created some unique facilities, such as Windsor, who just built domed fields with a hotel and restaurants in an area that they wanted to develop. I'd just like to see us develop it, but develop it under the commercial industrial base. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Councilor Carey is our council liaison, by the way.
Try not to trip.
Hello, Dan Edwards, 131 Hilton Drive, a 20-year resident of South Windsor. I'd like to echo the comments of the prior resident who's been here for 21 years. This is just not the right text amendment. This is not the right usage that they would like to change it to. There's just no way to put a positive spin on this and the impact to our school system. This is a great commercial area and needs to stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Anyone else? One of our new school customers coming up.
Eventually, we got like maybe he's 3 now, so 2 more years. But my name is Sarah Montano. I live at 216 Smith Street.
I know it's a little awkward for you, but if you could get the microphone closer, that's good. Yeah.
Okay, better?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Sarah Montano. I live at 216 Smith Street. I've lived there since I'm 5 years old. I've gone through the South Windsor school system. I'm a graduate of '07. I've seen a lot of changes on our street and within the town in regards to our land development. And I just wanted to say that now I have my son, and growing up, that street will really change in regards to the safety. I don't know why I'm getting like emotional, but I know a lot of my neighbors here that I see in our crowd walk that street. Families, we bike it, lots of dogs walking down that street. I just can't see the development of that staying the same. I see a lot of traffic increase. That intersection on Wheeler and Smith can be a struggle now, even though there's stop signs there. I remember the change when they wanted to make Smith Street, they wanted to take away the cul-de-sac when I was younger, and we fought that. The noise pollution I can just see coming from that. I mean, I can hear the concerts from Evergreen Walk. You know, I can just imagine the intensity of having apartments right across the street from us. So, you know, I want my son to grow up in a town that I love, and I just see this development changing that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Sir in back.
How you doing? I'm Robert Pulford from 307 Smith Street. Let's sign this one. Yeah, I just want to, you know, amplify what she's talking about. The traffic, people walking down the road. I got to be real careful driving down the road because there's a lot of people use our dead-end street as a walkway to go down to Evergreen Walk. If you put homes in there, it's just going to get worse because they'll cut across through the woods and over the berm or whatever to get to that road to walk to Evergreen Walk. It's just not the way to go. But if you went commercial, you know, that's better. Like, it'll give us a tax break, like everybody was saying. But I really oppose this housing development in that area. And I drive every morning down Smith Street to Wheeler and onto Pleasant Valley to get to the highway. And morning's fine, but when I come home, the traffic is just unbearable. And it would just get worse. So that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
I'm Karen Johnson. I live at 236 Smith Street, and I'd like to say that we are opposed to, I've been at that address for 40 years, and we would really be sad to see that area developed. The traffic, as mentioned, is really bad now. The school systems are overtaxed, and we would like to see that stay as open land. So, and Smith Street has become a very nice area for walking, biking, dogs, everything. So we'd like to see that continue. So we are opposed.
Anyone else? And thank you, by the way. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else who wishes to speak.
Chairman, you did have some letters submitted.
I'm sorry? Yeah, we do have letters, yes.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Frazier. I reside at 340 Smith Street. And I can just reiterate what everyone else is saying. And I can also add that we are having a problem as it is with people driving down our street going 50, 60 miles an hour, like it's a speedway. And we have people walking with their dogs, with their kids. It just would be, it would not be a good thing at all. Because even if you're building over, not near us, people, like they said, they're gonna cut through to get to Evergreen. I had to deal with Evergreen being built behind my house. I literally could, I don't have a good arm, but I could throw a baseball at LL Bean. I had to deal with that year after I bought my house, when I thought it was gonna be farmland. So I oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate all the voices from Smith Street. Anyone else wish to speak? We do have some letters. You have them. Okay. see what happened. Okay, great. Yeah, one of them. I think we have time to read them, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there's quite a few letters here. I'm going to try to make them quick. I have been told they're all in opposition, so we'll start with the first one that says...
I believe one of them is actually in favor. I think it's number 7
Oh.
in your packet.
Thank you, Josh. I'm sorry. Maybe I should start with that one. All right. Hello, Mr. Wagner. Art Ute has sent you a message via your contact. For several decades, South Windsor has welcomed an influx of residents eager to enjoy the town's quiet neighborhoods, access to shopping, and excellent schools. This growth has been measured and modest, allowing the town's infrastructure, schools, and services time to absorb and adapt. Increased population by necessity increases costs to both residents and the town. Increased traffic, noise, administrative, and infrastructure costs are a byproduct of population growth and density, and reduces the quality of life that makes South Windsor a desirable place. The potential for 680-plus new residential units and the resulting high density of 1,000-plus new inhabitants on a small footprint will overwhelm South Windsor and negatively impact the town and its residents. Keep the present zoning for this parcel.
Yeah, this is from Art Ute.
Okay. Yep.
A little hard to pick that out of the email.
Keep going?
Yes.
Okay, the next one is from Carol Matera. There should be a moratorium on new housing in town. We just rebuilt our schools and already are overcrowded. Thanks for your note. And then the next one is from Jeff Trachtenberg. Please have this read at the public hearing. Dear Planning and Zoning Commissioners, I am writing to you to express my opposition to the Down East LLC proposal. This town does not need a single housing unit, let alone 684 units. Our schools are overcrowded. They are at a breaking point. We barely have enough classroom space for our current enrollment, let alone a new development of so many units. Our children are being impacted by the overcrowding, by diminished individual attention due to the classroom sizes of 20 to 25 kids per class. This adversely impacts the quality of education and overall student performance. Stop this reckless housing expansion. This P&Z Commission is single-handedly destroying South Windsor. People come to South Windsor for the education and quality of life, and our schools are being destroyed. Please vote no to the proposal. Tim Shepard.
Mm-hmm.
Many years ago when I was young, I reacted to the bankruptcy of a tenant by thinking that we could survive the $50,000 loss of profit. What I didn't consider was all our overhead covered and the fact that we would now assume the cost of insurance, taxes, and repairs. What a swing from $50,000 profit to a $100,000 loss, $150,000 difference. The town must do a financial analysis of the swing involved with Down East's request, the positive net profit of the current zoning to the net cost of residential. Adding to the grand list via residential is like investing your 401 in a fund that guarantees you only 80% of what you invest. It's not our job to provide a profit to a developer unless it's in the best interest of the community, and this doesn't seem to be in our best interest. Then we have Katerina Furzko. Please do not put more housing in open land. We need a new rec center, indoor pool. We don't need more people to crowd our already dearly populated schools. Then we have one from Roy Norman, who I think spoke. Roy, so you're good? Okay. And then this is from Brian Faraci. Dear Planning and Zoning, I would like to express my support for adding an overlay zone. to the area behind Plaza at Buckland Hills. The property in question has been zoned commercial for over 30 years, and in that time, nothing has been built. With brick and mortar retail struggling due to the shift to online shopping, it is quite possible that there won't be any proposals for large-scale retail forthcoming. A change to the overlay zone would enable a wider variety of what can be built on the land, increasing the potential for some form of development. It would also allow the PZC to maintain control over what gets built. An overlay zone would also increase the likelihood that property contributes significantly more to South Windsor's tax base than it currently does, thus benefiting the entire town. And with a significant housing deficit in not only South Windsor but the entire state, more housing is very much in need. I encourage the PZC to support the proposal. And I think that's it.
That's it. All right, thank you, Commissioner. All right, so we'll now get comments from the commissioners, starting with Commissioner Kurasi.
I have no additional comments.
Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Thank you. I have a few comments and questions. Going through the presentation, on page 10, the presentation from the applicant, not the superintendent, it says in there that, and I quote, simply seeks a pathway forward, not an approval of development. So that, and that's the quote. That context provides me and the commission the thought that if this is approved, that you guys won't come back for a while with the development. But I think we all know that's not true. So my question is, hypothetically, if we close the public hearing tonight and we vote on it tonight and it passes, when would you guys come back with an application?
Don't know yet. We still have to figure that out. We don't know what we're doing. I think the first thing we would do is try and do another informal discussion with the commission and talk about opportunities. At the end of the day, our main objective here has been to get a voice, to open a discussion. The fact is, under the DC zone, we can't move forward. Nothing's gonna happen there. I know that might make people happy, but you've got a property that you guys, you as a commission, not you as individuals, have denied applications at for decades. And in the comments tonight, there have been more about specific developments than a text amendment. There's been a rejection of both commercial and residential. So there's a clear message here that no one wants anything to happen there. We actually heard someone say they want to stay as open space. That infringes on the rights of a property owner, a right to do something. So my point being is we've been looking for a voice. We've been looking for an opportunity to discuss. We've been looking for an opportunity to find a pathway forward. That's what this is about, giving us a pathway forward so we can figure out what can occur there, what's possible that's satisfactory to you as a commission, as a community, and to my client as a property owner. So it would be some time before we're back here with a formal application. A dialogue would have to happen first, because one, this approval gives us a pathway. It gives us a reason to actually pursue, right? But it still doesn't determine what it is we're submitting. That requires discussion. That requires community engagement. And we need to figure something out.
Okay. Yeah, so it's fine if you didn't have an answer to my question then. I was just curious about it, because usually when we have a zone change or text amendment application, 2 months later we'll see an application for the actual development. So that's why I ask. And I just find it quite odd, because you guys have come forward to us before in terms of a discussion item with this exact concept. So I'm confused that you guys still are not sort of aware of what could this parcel be, right? I mean, we've had commissioners, we've all gone around the ring before sharing our ideas of, you know, what it could be, what it shouldn't be, you know, and I'm just kind of curious why that concept hasn't changed, even though I know we have quite a few commissioners on here who have spoken, you know, against the concept already.
Right, so as was shown in the history, power centers have been rejected there. Mixed use with office, retail, and residential was rejected there. You guys suggested that we come in with industrial. We include that in the uses. But we had to make changes. Right now, you don't allow industrial within 500 feet of a residential use or zone. Well, draw a 500-foot line from the residential zoning that surrounds that property on 3 sides, and basically the parcel's done for. There's no industrial there. So we provided a flexible provision that would allow industrial. Not saying we're gonna do it, but we're listening so we can have a dialogue. So industrial would be extremely disturbing to the residential surrounding. Commercial office is probably not market viable. Retail will harm the additional retail. That being said, could something be figured out here? Possibly. We came to you in January, which we think is the most viable. We've put in provisions here to be more flexible, to add more community space, to add more higher percentages of age restricted, to phase things out, to do a bunch of things. We're trying to speak to you through a text amendment that's saying we want to talk. We want to figure out a way to move forward. That's what we're asking for.
Okay. And then the last question is, very easy, straightforward question. I hope you guys have an answer, because again, this has been a proposal for quite a while. We talk about the school children population, and I'm just curious, a number, ballpark. It doesn't have to be, obviously margin of error. How many kids, school children, do you think that this project could produce?
Just look at your own data. You don't need me to tell you anything. And if you're going, and the Board of Ed looks at their own data every day. That one-page sheet there, it's a bunch of that staff provided. It's a bunch of condominiums. That's not what we've been proposing. You've got a bunch of ADA condominiums that have 3 bedrooms, so they're not all 1s and 2s. And the fact is, if you look at that, your town-wide average of school-aged children per housing unit is 48.48, less than half a student per housing unit. On that list, right, only 3 developments exceed 0.48. And you know what? South Windsor Woods, whichever one talks to, it's the outlier. It's the exception. No one ever does the number on the math. Your new single-family residential in South Windsor Estates, they're paying, those are $750,000 plus properties, over $20,000 per property in taxes. They well fund their school-aged children. The fact is, you have all the data in front of you to figure that out. We're not asking for a development. We're not proposing apartments here tonight. And, yeah, I could go on for hours about this. I could answer a bunch of unanswered questions that the Board of Ed just always hangs out there, that they don't finish with this South Windsor effect thing. But no, we're just asking for a text amendment. We're not asking for school-aged children in apartments.
Okay. I'm happy that you dove into the question. There's some points I do agree with, right? Like obviously South Windsor Woods is an outlier. I think that this development, if it were to occur, I think would be closer aligned with like Tempo, for example, because these units are going to be closer to that. But still, it is kind of concerning that we sort of don't have a direction of what this could look like in terms of school children impact, that we're proposing this massive style development. And again, this is just a text amendment, not an actual, final look at it. I understand. But the fact that, so much of the presentation and your presentation tonight rarely talks about the school children impact is concerning. That's all I have to say.
If I may respond, Chair. Could I just quickly respond to that comment since it wasn't in the form of a question? Chairman, may I respond to that? He didn't ask me a question.
Of course.
Thank you. Once again, like I said, we didn't talk about it because we don't have a development application in front of you. Yes, we were before you January 9th in informal discussion with the concept that we think best works for that site. We heard you loud and clear. We didn't come back with an application. We came back with a text amendment to further this discussion, to create a pathway forward. I can't give you school-age projections on a development that doesn't exist. I don't have those counts. And at the end of the day, provisions like that we wrote into this text amendment, the incentive provision or the provision for 40% or more, for a minimum of 40% to be age restricted. We're willing to negotiate on that. Maybe it's 45%, maybe it's 50%. Maybe there's other ways of looking at this. But just being shut down with this kind of idea that nothing should go there, everything's going to destroy the world, and why aren't we building the industrial or commercial that we've been told to build there, isn't helping anyone here. If you're feeling frustrated, we're feeling as frustrated as a property owner.
Okay, I'll respond to that. I do not agree with the notion that nothing should go there in our lifetime. I think one day, something will go there. You've shown us in this presentation that there's been multiple attempts to put something there, and it's been denied, and keeps kicking the can down the barrel or down the road. I think one day something will go there. Again, that's up to discussion and deliberation for us to determine whether or not that day is this year, next year, or within the next 10 years. I think at our POCD meeting, the last P&Z meeting we had, where we talked about the POCD, I was very clear that we should not be pigeonholing ourselves into a corner. We should be open to anything that could work. But at the same time, at the end of the day, we've got to make sure it works with the town. We have a public here, and we have commissioners that also have opinions. I'm just trying to ask questions that I think will be brought up, that I know are important. Because at the end of the day, when a lot of the public is talking about one issue and it's not really brought up, it's still got to be on your mind, even though it's not an actual development. I know you've come forward before with a proposed, a discussion item with sort of a loose estimate of how many units you could have. And at that point, there should be a loose estimate of how many school children that could produce, even though half of them are age restricted. Again, my thoughts, you don't have to respond to it, but I'm happy to pass the microphone down the desk.
I thank you for your thoughts.
Commissioner Foley?
Well, if this text amendment was approved, you would immediately come back with residential. We've heard from the Human Resources. We've heard from the Molly from our Parks and Rec Department. We've heard from the Board of Education. This is viable commercial land, okay? I believe our tax base right now is above 85% residential, okay? There is no benefit to residential. There's zero, because no matter what you do with residents, it's an impact to the community. We make no money. It's a lose-lose. That's why we've asked, and we did have our workshops, and we've had the community, their input. There's 27,000 people that we represent, and pretty much everybody has said, leave it commercial. So that's what my message to you is when you came before. Leave it commercial. You have to do your work. I look at other towns with viable downtowns. I look at Glassbury, bring it up all the time. You take a look at that entire area. That's well over 50 acres in that whole region. There are so many restaurants you can't even figure out. Make it a restaurant mecca. I don't know. But residential is a lose-lose to our community, to all aspects of it, okay? So your job as a designer, and you're great with statistics and whatnot, find a way. But it's commercial, and it's not our job to change the zone.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dexter?
Michelle, if this is the last parcel of design commercial land in town, do we need an overlay zone? Can't we just adjust the permitted uses and the special exception uses for this last parcel?
You could, yeah. I mean, you're not required to do an overlay zone.
Okay.
That is what the applicant's proposing as a way to get the residential component on it. But, I mean, it currently has a list of uses in the regulations and regulations, so.
I'm just asking for my for my own sake, because similar to how Commissioner Cavagnaro started off, a pathway forward makes me very nervous, because, we are, we know what the court system is like now. And I just am very concerned about approving something that is a path forward to something else, and then we put the brakes on, and now we get, the notice. So I don't want to lose commercial land in this town. Once it's gone forever. And I don't want to also repeat what everybody else has said. Thank you.
Commissioner Willett.
So I appreciate one statement you made, Mr. Poland, which is we're trying to speak to you through the text amendment. I think you are also trying to speak to us through the POCD. You made some text amendment or some changes that were requested in the POCD, and now we made those. They're coming back to bite us in the butt. If you look at the Planning Department's report from 7/23, number 10, one of the PZC consideration when evaluating a text amendment is how the amendment fits into the goals of the POCD. So we shot ourselves in the foot, all right? First thing. Second, if everybody can grab this document up here, turn it around to the last page. And this document right here, the big one, you'll want to, unless you know it by heart.
Yep.
Can you help me understand on the last page, 20 on the back, what you added in your red line, special exception language, where you're going to create, you didn't discuss this when you presented earlier, you left this out, okay? You're adding special exceptions for warehouse use, distribution facility use, and last mile facility use. With, when you look at the summary of it, you're removing the setback requirements from residential zones. The reason you're doing that is to strong arm us. If we let this go through the way it's stated here and we deny a residential development, you come back and say, I'm gonna put an Amazon warehouse on that lot with 0 setback. And because of what you're trying to insert here, we would have no choice but to approve it. So I'll make 2 observations. The first is, I don't appreciate your condescending attitude towards us. You're here making a request. You have an attitude and you're talking down to us. I don't appreciate that. The second thing is, you are speaking to us through the text amendment and telling us how disingenuous this whole charade is. Period. That's the end of my comments.
Chair, may I respond? Sure. So first off, you haven't shot yourself in the foot with the POCD. As I said in my testimony early on, the POCD is non-binding. It's an advisory document. You can abide by it or you can't. It's up to you. Consistency has to be found with the comprehensive plan of zoning. You only have to consider the POCD. So we weren't playing any games there. Number 2, yes, we eliminated the 500-foot setback that you guys established on industrial zones. Why? Draw a 500-foot setback on 3 sides of that parcel, and you can't develop there. It wouldn't become 0. The setback requirements for the zone itself, the 125 feet from residential things and so forth, would kick in. But that carte blanche, 500-foot setback that you've done to industrial, yes, that wouldn't apply. It's not about strong-arming. It's not about being condescending, which I apologize if I came across that way. I did not intend to. But the fact is, we are just trying to open up opportunities here. You guys said in January, industrial would be appealing to you. We're willing to explore it. We have explored it. We have looked further into it, just as we've looked further into other uses. There's now the fait accompli here that we come back with solely residential. Is that an option? Yes. But other options are out there too. And we're trying to open up pathways to them. So, thank you.
Okay, first of all, I have some questions. I think this is for Attorney Pearson. So let's say we adopt some sort of an overlay zone option. And you've emphasized how that leaves us in control of what happens. But if you or a subsequent property owner comes in with a proposal that is consistent with the overlay zone document, how much flexibility do we have with modifying that if we no longer like it for some reason? Whoever's in this seat when it comes in, is it kind of either on or off? The whole thing's on? You know, if I got 15 acres, I want to put the whole thing on, or can we, do we have flexibility in how much of or what features of the GMOZ or GSOZ get implemented?
To land that proposed overlay, which would at that point be presented to you with a concept plan, a master plan that'd be pretty thorough in terms of development, and obviously it would behoove any applicant who got to that stage, assuming you approve the text amendment, to address all the concerns that we've also heard that you might have. With regard to support services, there could be conditions that are proposed that would make it more palatable to you. There could be any number of concepts that might make adoption of the master plan, which thereby lands the overlay, something that you could approve. But again, it is a zoning decision. It remains a legislative decision. All your legislative authority comes into play in deciding whether you like what we presented, you think we could make changes that would make it better, change uses, reduce size, add conditions, anything. It's really an opportunity for a negotiation about what might be acceptable. And if we never get to the point where it is acceptable to the commission, then you deny it. You have no obligation whatsoever to approve a plan that we come in with under that text if it gets approved.
You said something that contradicts some experience we've had, and I don't want to get into details because this isn't the right place, but that we could add conditions to applying an overlay zone, and I'm not sure that's true, but okay. Okay, Michelle. Yeah.
To the plan, you could add conditions that would affect the master plan, yes.
We've had the experience with the zone change general plan where we put a condition on the general plan and it was not okay.
A master plan?
It was a general plan.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
Yes, they are.
And this is calling out a master plan.
Pardon me?
This is calling out a master plan in this regulation.
Correct.
You've heard the very serious concerns, and I don't know which of you is the right one to answer, that we have with overpopulating our schools by building multifamily housing. Is there anything you would do to this overlay zone to protect us from really causing serious problems with our schools?
I think the protection is built in already to the extent that you can control the master plan. So if Commissioner Cavanaro, you asked specifically how many students we would project per a development plan. And Mr. Poland told you that, well, we don't have a plan, so we can't do that. But when we do have a concept, were you to approve the text change, we'd come in and we would talk about what we would project for those numbers of potential students. And you could decide whether that was, for all the reasons you can decide a zone change, for instance. Will there be negative impacts on traffic? Will there be other negative impacts on town resources? Is it suitable at that location? All of those things are things that you consider when you consider whether or not a zone change is appropriate. So you can consider all those things at that point. But I don't think it I mean, if you were suggesting that we should have something that says in this text that you would consider a text change that says, you know, something about there's a limited number of students that are impacted as a result of the proposal or something like that. I think you lose the purpose behind the flexibility of this text change by putting that concern into it itself. I mean, you could perhaps add language that says, you know, one of the things that you might consider in deciding, which you're going to do anyway, when you look at a master plan, you might want to amend it to say something like you will be looking at specifically impacts on the school system as a result of the plan. I mean, that's conceivable of one way of addressing the issue now without having a specific plan in front of you. Looking at it doesn't mean you would therefore preclude any plan just because it does have an impact, because any plan may have an impact on the school system. But if you're concerned about somebody going to court or using that against you when you consider a master plan, then you could add some qualifying language that indicates clearly that's going to be a concern you're going to look at when you evaluate the master plan.
Okay, so you're actually leading into some comments that I actually prepared. I did a very detailed review of the entire proposal, so probably you might be more comfortable having a seat, and I'll go through. We've given you a copy of this, right, Michelle? We gave it?
No, I don't think I've seen it, have I?
Yeah. And we gave every member a copy. Okay, good. So, first of all, I just say that these comments are mine, and they're not the comments of the commission. They're just me, and other commissioners might disagree. And if you know, I mean, there are suggestions for changes in here, but just because you accept those suggestions doesn't mean the thing's going to pass. Okay, so I do have a problem with overlay zones. The last two we've tried to implement have led to trouble for us. So personally, I'd be more comfortable with an actual, you know, just a plain old zone change that accomplishes whatever your objectives are.
If I could just comment on that, Chairman. I understand your concern about overlays. I do personally prefer them, but I believe Chairman Dexter also kind of got at this, and I chose not to ask to comment. But the overlay provides the protection of the legislative approval of the zoning. If we just amend the DC zone, put in all these uses that we'd like by special exception, then you guys are bound to your special exception standards and your site plan standards. And we actually have a leg up. But with doing the overlay where we have to come in for the master plan zoning map amendment to actually land it, you guys have all the discretion in the world, as has been stated multiple times. So
Okay.
the choice of that is to give you guys the comfort of you can basically say no to us for any reason.
Okay. I would like to go through this. I think the impact of traffic on the full extent of Pleasant Valley Road and Smith Street has to be considered. You know, measuring the traffic generated by similar housing would be an issue with any proposal you might make. Same thing with the sewer system, and we've gotten a letter from the superintendent of pollution control regarding that. I guess I don't see where you were, you know, your letter said that there's mixed proximate use near the DC zone. The only use of that type I'm aware of is in Evergreen Walk, but that's kind of not connected, so. So a key requirement is that we have to protect the single-family housing on Smith Street from many of the kind of negative impacts that we could have by whatever we do here. And the nearby multifamily housing deserves some protection as well. I'm very concerned about reducing the buffering and setbacks because of that issue, and I see that happening. The applicant should view the South Windsor DC zone and their plaza at Buckland Hills in a single project. And actually, your presentation, I think, showed maps where you were considering the Manchester side of the property to be part of, you know, the overall layout. So and that means that you have the opportunity to make changes on the Manchester side to make it more appealing commercially on the South Windsor side. So just like when we put in, or when developer came in to put in Whole Foods, they tore down a couple of buildings to make it more viable to put a Whole Foods in. So that's a consideration. Still though, I think I'm with you on the idea that some kind of mixed proximate use is the only way we're going to incentivize commercial in that area. So that does mean some sort of housing. There's a huge need for housing, both affordable and market rate for all age groups. But any increase in housing will lead to increased demand for services, more so than commercial uses. To some extent, the town council could use the added tax revenue of both housing and commercial side to provide some of the needed services. So if we need to hire more people in the human resources or human services, you know, you're generating taxes that would do that. But when meeting new demand requires the town to build and staff new infrastructure, especially schools, the tax argument falls short. I don't think that this facility would pay for building a new school, for example, or staffing it over the long term. So that's why I would consider limiting new housing to 55 plus. That's not free of problems, but it's a form of housing that at least doesn't impact the schools. It still creates problems for other senior activities in town, but I think they'd be a little bit easier to deal with. So my last paragraph on the front page, before I get into some detailed comments, is I think that the problems that those comments and the people who've spoken raise, we're going to be going through a series of extensions of public hearings, trying to figure out what the commission will approve, with you trying to figure out, and you're trying to have, you know, a viable use of your property. So to me, going through a series of public hearings is not an effective way to negotiate, and I think that's what you're looking for. So one alternative, which I'll offer to you, is to close this public hearing, reject this without prejudice, and establish a committee with planning and zoning and other agencies and you to try to negotiate something that's workable for the town and gives you a path to development that's really viable. So that's there. Maybe you'd like to comment on that before I go into all the detailed comments.
First, I want to thank you for a very thoughtful page one. Some of the best information I feel we've heard so far. And just quickly, broad brush to address it, where you talk about impacts of traffic, impacts on infrastructure, impacts on facilities. Those are all things that we have to explore, and we will explore if we have the opportunity to submit an application. Once again, that gets back to this trying to create a pathway. We look forward to exploring all that. We look forward to figuring out, can we assist with that pump station, with that forced main, with those concerns over that infrastructure? We recognize if we're putting the demand there, we have maybe some responsibility and so forth. That's what we're trying to get to. But with that said, your idea of a committee is intriguing. Let me propose it back to you in a different way, though. Yes, you could reject us tonight, and we could form a committee. I guess the only way we would consider that is if there was a time limit on it, like 3 months or something. This can't drag out for 6 months, a year, or whatever. You know, time is money on our end. Time is market on our end. The other alternative is, let's work on tightening this up, approve the text amendment as we've requested, and we agree to enter into a committee process, just as you're proposing, to design a development that we will work side by side with you and the community to come up with a pathway forward.
Okay, and you don't necessarily have to answer right now. I would like to go through some of the detailed comments, but yeah, and then that may give you a feeling for where we would be if we just address this as it's presented. So there are comments, some of the comments in here are really just editorial, like making sure you use the same language for streets of a certain type or whatever. The ones I've highlighted in yellow, I think, are ones I want to mention. I do want to see, you know, consistent and a clear definition of what's meant by public roads, surrounding roads, interior driveways, those kind of things. How we talk about roads was confusing to me, and probably would be to anyone in the future. I just note that Pleasant Valley is the only abutting arterial road. There is access already through the divided road that goes past Joe and Fabric, between the hotel and Joe and Fabric. So that's a Pleasant Valley access. So we need to clarify how access includes the main streets that surround the property and the Manchester border, how we're going to, you know, do access through Manchester. I would like to move the requirement for general plan of development from the housing section 51115D2. I know it's there in the gateway zone, but I'd like to see that moved up to the 511.3, which is the general concepts. So we get that thing on the table right away. The concept of units, the way we develop Evergreen Walk, they have a bunch of units there. They sell them off one by one or lease them off or whatever they do. And they come in and say, all right, in this unit we want to put up some multifamily housing. In this unit we want to put a Costco, you know. So that might be a nice way to present the general plan of development. Skipping down to the permitted uses, instead of including single-family lots in the zone, perhaps a better thing would be to change the map, to add RR to some of the properties on Smith Street. So again, they're seeing single-family housing like they already have, governed by RR. In 11.5C, and also in the table, and I think Commissioner Willett commented about this, I'm really concerned about eliminating Section 7 applicability. I hadn't done the distance calculation that you referred to, but we spent a lot of time, we spent months in a committee trying to figure out how to avoid the kind of conflict we're seeing when we build warehouses too close to residential. I mean, there are, I think, legitimate concerns about that and about what the trucks bring in and the noise they create. So, I mean, maybe a different distance might work, but I have a feeling that maybe based on your distance calculation, it's just not viable to put warehouses in there. Unless we could limit it maybe to certain types of warehouses that don't make a lot of noise. I don't know if such a thing exists, but I'm looking at the Amazon facility with its 65 little distribution trucks that go out every morning, and then they come back every evening, and then they've got big trucks coming in all night long to prepare that. So maybe this means we just can't put warehouses in there. I don't know. The consolidated parcels, there was language in there which really oriented toward the GD zone, which is much bigger, many owners. I mean, we have 3 parcels now. You own all of them. I mean, maybe the idea would be to do your general plan and then, sell pieces off. So consolidate it first, do your general plan, or don't consolidate it, but do your general plan of the whole thing, and then with the general plan, you have the ability to sell pieces off. In the yard and bulk requirements, paragraph E, in considering recreational uses, the commission will consider the environmental impact on nearby areas, including but not limited to noise, hours of operation, dust, tracking of dirt and mud onto roads, parking lots, disruption of wildlife, etc. With the schools, we had a lengthy discussion about pickleball as an emerging noise issue that's really disrupting a lot of neighborhoods across the country. So that's just one example where we would want to be really careful about what type of recreation you put in an area. So I don't think that's a very challenging paragraph. On access and parking, I highlighted that bike ped access is different than automobile access. Could be allowed on Smith Street to have bikes go out there. I got the feeling, though, that maybe the residents aren't too happy with the level of pedestrians that they already have that aren't from their neighborhoods. But we do need to look at bike and pedestrian access, at least as a potentially different. I'm wondering if we can eliminate access points on Wheeler Road, or at least limit it to 1. You have a berm that covers most of the Wheeler Road border. There is a section where near the corner of Smith and Wheeler that, if you put something in there, you might need an access on Wheeler. We definitely want it on Wheeler and not on Smith, though, if you're going to do that. And paragraph A in that same section, address Manchester border access, especially using the divided road. I think I mentioned that a couple of times. I think you got pretty good language in some places about protecting the berms, but in this particular paragraph C2, make sure the language protects the berms. Dropping down to the requirements for multifamily and mixed use. We could eliminate industrial. The only column in DC that DC uses that are also in column I, industrial, are the solar farms. So I don't know if we want to have 22-wheeler become a solar farm, but I guess I wouldn't completely rule it out. I don't know how economically viable for such a nice piece of land a solar farm would be, but we could discuss that. And A2B, several of the units you described there contribute to school children. We've had that discussion. Also in A2B, include wording to be consistent with built town infrastructure capacity, including schools, include local community center open to the general public, managed by Parks and Rec as a consideration, possibly with a joint venture. I'm just thinking, if we're going to increase the demand on Parks and Rec, even if it's a senior housing, I look at most of the community centers in these developments, and they're very lightly used. I don't think they do what our community center does. So I'm really looking for something different than just a community building that can be rented out to people having weddings or whatever. In A2D, the 12.5% I really believe should be 18%. That's what it is in other zones in your tables, or at least in, actually in this document that Michelle produced for us, the big document. A2D, there's this last sentence, which creates a huge loophole. I think that's the sentence that eliminates the 2-to-1 ratio. And I think that 2-to-1 ratio is really critical. I think, you know, you came in January and talked to us about, I don't know, was it 600 or 800 units? But it's now basically an A2F allowing 250 units each time someone comes in. So that's a kind of a concern. Again, perhaps we would address that with the general plan of development. But this section is also pretty complicated. I have trouble understanding it. And if I'm having trouble understanding something, I think other people would be too. And there is, in the GD zone, there's a total limit of 365 units. In terms of area, how big is this 50 acres relative to the whole GD zone? Do you have any idea, Michelle? Are we like 1/10 or 1/5 or?
I don't know, I wouldn't want to guess.
Okay, but anyway, you get the idea that if we're only allowing 365 units in the GD zone, which is much bigger, and I'm not just talking Evergreen Walk, it's also across the street and other areas. I think, and maybe 100 isn't the right number, but we ought to look at being in proportion to what we do in the GD zone. And, you know, the language in the gateway zone is actually easier to understand. So, continuing, an A2D, I would add paragraph F, which is basically something we've sort of talked about. The 10-year projected elementary, middle school, and high school enrollment contribution based on South Windsor experience with similar housing versus the capacity of built school building capacity and overall enrollment projections, basically adding the schools to any consideration of housing as a special exception. Now, I think what you've heard is you probably wouldn't get that approved, but maybe 8 or 9 years down the road, that would not be the issue. And then in the table, there are several places where it says Article 7 does not apply. It may be Section 7.3, 7.7, 7.5 is applicable. If there are reasons why you don't want to apply parts of those rules, then just let's state them specifically. And then the warehouse type uses, I think we've already discussed. But my position when I was writing this, you know, over the last several days was we had to comply with 724. You've got this 500-foot problem. Those are comments that, so I don't know, the detailed comments I made are basically trying to come to something that is more understandable, gives you some of what you want, makes it look like the GD zone. But if you go in and fix it up with all these comments, it still doesn't guarantee my fellow commissioners are gonna want to approve it. So I'll offer you a chance to come back and challenge me on any of that or make suggestions.
We appreciate the detailed and thoughtful comments, and I would definitely take the vast majority of them into consideration and redraft them into the regulation to tighten it up. Some of them are pretty straightforward and simple. Some I understand your concerns, you know, whether it be the economics of a solar farm or whether it be the negative impact of an industrial use. You guys in January recommended industry to us. We've said all along the land uses on 3 sides are residential. That's why we've thought all along that residential land use is the best there. Commercial land use is will be the most disturbing. But yeah, I'm willing to consider all these and provide a revised regulation before the commission. And I do recognize that it doesn't guarantee anything beyond your consideration, Chair, as the other members have their own concerns.
So I guess the question then is, how do we want to proceed? You know, I had the offer of going out, closing the public hearing and going out to committees, or continuing the public hearing to allow you to come back with another proposal.
Say something.
We would do it by a vote, but we have to see how they're reacting to this. Maybe, go ahead.
Well, we have a couple of options, Mr. Chairman. First of all, maybe I should speak with my client for about 5 minutes and just come back. But if you had suggestions, I mean, I'm not sure if this is something that your committee is also interested in doing. We could certainly come back with a revised text proposal, keep the hearing open and revise the text in line with the...
Before you go off for 5 minutes, let's see if any of the other commissioners have more to say, and then I'll let you do it.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is a solution. I do want to preface before I begin. I apologize for sort of, let's say complaining without providing a solution to it. I know it may come off as condescending, and I apologize if my questions were repetitive in that nature, but I just wanted to repeat some concerns. But I do have some sort of solution, I guess a path forward. So how do I put it? The same attempt to develop this parcel of land has been attempted since 1979, almost 50 years. 1979, the same exact way. You guys have, I'm not gonna say you guys, but the owner, whoever, they've tried to do it the same exact way every single time, trying to develop the entire plot of land all at once. My proposal, or at least my idea, pie in the sky idea, I'm not sure it's possible, I'm just gonna bring it up. Rather than trying to develop it all at once, would it be possible to split it up into, let's say, 5 to 10 different parcels and develop it 3 years at a time? That way, it's not impacting everything at once. I think the only way this could work is if a brand new elementary school was being built on alongside it, but that's not happening. This is an idea. I'm not sure it could work. I bring this up as an idea because at the end of the day, I realize that, one day, like I said, something's gonna get built on it. And I also acknowledge the fact that you guys probably shouldn't be trying the same exact method time and time again when the commission of varying different members over the past 50 years have said no every single time. I'm not sure that's an idea you guys are willing to do, and I also bring it as a sense of opportunity as well. I mean, maybe the first time around, the first parcel of land, you want to do some sort of residential, mixed-use, commercial, fine. Maybe 3 years after that, you realize that the market has changed a little bit, you want to do something else with the next parcel of land. There's more flexibility, and I said the same exact thing in the POCD meeting, that we should not be pigeonholing ourselves into a corner. We should be, I guess, optimistic of what the piece of property could be, and again, that's a sense of idea. If you guys are really, really, really adamant about doing something with this land, you guys got to be open to compromise. Because at the end of the day, even on this commission, I've got to be open to compromise as well. I don't get everything I want, and same thing with every other commissioner. We always have to compromise. That's my middle ground solution. I'm hoping it's something that is viable. If not, I was happy to give you guys an idea. I wanted to give a solution alongside my complaints.
Anybody else want to comment before we take a break? So, all right, we'll take a 5-minute break. It is now 9:50. We'll be back by 9:55.
Thank you.
By responding. Well, I gave you a chance. Okay, so that means continuing the public hearing makes more sense to you. Well, that's what I'm afraid of, and that's why I made all these.
Let them come back.
So we're calling the meeting back to order, and our applicant has had a chance to think things over, however briefly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We have spoken amongst ourselves. We do appreciate the comments we've received, all of them. And we'd like to have an opportunity to have this go over to your next meeting on August 20. Take a look at the regulation, consider this committee idea potentially, touch base with staff, work with staff, and just see where to go. We're not in a position to tell you, there's just too much to digest to be able to say, please make a decision on this tonight. We would like to have an opportunity to come back after we've heard everything you've said.
Okay, there are some parameters about the committee idea. Once we open a public hearing, I don't think we can go off into committees and discuss it.
I don't think that's what she's implying.
No, I mean afterwards.
It would be after
a decision is made.
Yeah, we make a decision and then.
I understand.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to the next meeting, unless you want to comment on this at any.
No, we're tired. We've got a lot to think about.
Okay.
And we would like, if that's possible, to go over to the next meeting. Thank you.
You want to make a motion to continue the public hearing? Nobody wants to continue the public hearing. All right.
Motion to close the public hearing.
All right, we have a motion to close the public hearing. Can we say without, well, that's a separate issue. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? All right. All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Take the roll call.
Commissioner Qureshi?
Aye.
Commissioner Cavagnaro?
Aye.
Commissioner Foley?
Aye.
Commissioner Dexter?
Aye.
Commissioner Willett?
Aye.
Chairman Wagner?
Nay.
5 ayes, 1 nay.
So the public hearing is closed. I think it's only fair to the applicant that we act. So that means we need a motion to extend the meeting past the 9:30, the regular meeting.
I make a motion to extend the meeting. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. So now we need a motion, well, we have on our agenda to act on it. We have on our agenda the minutes, which I think we can defer. We also have on our motion to act on this application. And I've lost my agenda, but do we have a discussion or a motion?
I make a motion to deny application 24-10P Downey's zoning text amendment.
Can we make that without prejudice?
Yeah, in good faith, yeah.
Can we make that without prejudice?
Without prejudice.
Without prejudice? Okay. Any other discussion of that? All in favor?
Aye.
So that gets us back to the idea of continuing to negotiate with the client, with the applicant in some other form.
Well,
we could,
that's not necessary, right?
Well, I mean, I think, to me, there's advantage to the town having something done with this property, doing what's necessary to make it viable. But we've rejected their proposal that they came in with. But, you know, by doing without prejudice, it gives us an opportunity to have a committee that, say, involves planning and zoning, economic development, town council. Probably that's enough people. Maybe 2 people from each of these, bipartisan, and work with the applicant on a proposal to, you know, a new proposal that we think serves the town and serves, you know, as best possible their need to make this property viable. So, I guess I would appreciate a motion to direct the chair to work with, to establish a committee, work with other agencies, to establish a committee to work with the applicant to come up with a version of this that is workable or not. So.
I'll attempt the language for what you just said. I'll make a motion that the chair creates a working group to resolve this matter. Does that work?
You seconded it? No. Who's seconding it?
Well,
Do we have
somebody's got to second it first, so.
Okay, you second it.
All right.
I second.
Okay. Discussion.
I think we should all be present for the discussion on what goes on with this property.
The only way to do that, well, I guess we could have another discussion with the applicant, yeah, okay? Now, do we want to involve other agencies in that discussion? This Evergreen Walk, the whole development of Evergreen Walk, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the history of that, but that had a committee set up.
Yeah, actually, we had the Buckland Gateway Zone, actually had 2 or 3 different committees over the years. Most recently, when we modified the regulations to allow for residential units back in about 2009. I-291, you had a committee set up for I-291 zoning, so we have had some success with some committee work with drafting regulations. Of course, anything a committee drafts would come to the commission for a regulation, just like a public hearing, like anything else. So you could do it with the applicant in the whole commission. I'm not sure how streamlined or how quickly you would get progress made, but that certainly is something you could invite the applicant to a meeting sometime this fall.
What about, did those committees involve other agencies?
Typically, we would have membership from planning and zoning, in the wetlands, EDC. We usually had someone from the applicant or the property owner. Often we would have resident representatives on it, usually 6 or 8 people. And again, usually working through a text amendment or some changes on a text.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we got 2 alternatives here. One is to do that sort of a committee, which, to avoid having a quorum, you know, we have to keep only like 2 members or 3 members of this board, and the same thing with any other board. Or the other thing is to just have more discussions here with everybody on this, and not have other agencies involved. I mean, I think I'd listen to the applicant also, if they have a feeling about that.
If you're going to have other agencies involved, I believe that the agencies involved would have to be our liaison from the town council. You'd have to have Parks and Rec. The people that inserted letters into this public hearing would and have to be present.
I'm not sure if they have to be present. I mean, obviously, their interests have to be known and their concerns have to be known. I mean, the third
Education
alternative
specifically.
we haven't talked about is the applicant could just choose to submit another text amendment based on what they heard tonight. You denied it without prejudice. It gives them an opportunity to do that. So that would be an alternative that could occur as well.
Would this be done in an executive session? Or
No, because
No.
because we wouldn't have a majority.
Well, there'd be no reason to do anything in executive session. We don't have any pending claims or litigation, and we don't meet the criteria for executive session for anything that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's not a personnel matter, it's not a purchase, et cetera. I don't know, I see Attorney Pearson either pondering or crying, I don't know.
So right now, you currently have a motion and a second, right? We haven't voted,
right.
okay.
But I guess I would hear from Attorney Pearson or Mr. Poland or any of the,
Specifically about setting up a commission to be able to, or a committee to
Yeah.
look at this? I mean, we're open to the possibility. In terms of the
I mean,
details
the other
of it.
alternative is just to have you come in with another proposal.
No, I think a dialogue, I mean, we can always do that. And if it doesn't look like any progress is being made in terms of, something that's a productive conversation between the various parties that are involved, then maybe that's, what we would do. But doesn't mean one should not make the effort to have the dialogue that could be productive for both sides, or all sides.
Okay. So,
I'm not quite sure I understand the format of what it is you're proposing to put together, but I'm not sure either whether you need to decide that tonight. I mean, it's something we can talk about, and you can set it up as soon as possible if.
well, by leaving the motion somewhat open-ended, that would give me a chance to talk to other committees and see about their willingness to participate, and also talk to you about what works for you. We could, depending on who we use, we could do this during the day or not, depending on people's work commitments and so on. So,
Can we leave an open motion? Can we leave it open? Because we haven't closed, we had discussion, we haven't closed. Yeah, we haven't voted.
The word is not table, but what's the right word for?
Mr. Chairman, to make it easier for you, you've closed the public hearing. You've put a motion out to deny the application that's in front of you without prejudice. So I think, you can move on that at the same time. You can, I don't know if you have to
Didn't we already deny it?
work out a motion now as to how to proceed with the committee. I mean,
The motion was to direct you to set up a committee, and if that gets approved, you and I could work on the framework of the committee and bring it back to the commission for review, or if that's what you'd like to do.
All right, so we would come back to you and to everybody in August.
It's August, and then we could get it going starting in September if that were worked out for everybody's schedule.
All right, so we have a motion. Second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
The motion that Alan.
Your motion again? Restated? Try to remember what you said.
Motion.
Actually, our secretary could tell.
I'll repeat it. Motion that the chair creates a working group to resolve this matter. Very vague language, so it can mean anything that we can do to resolve this matter.
Okay, and a second.
Second.
So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We did deny it, right? We did deny it. Yes, okay. She didn't think it had been denied, okay. I think right now a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, public participation.
We didn't really follow our agenda.
So
Can we do minutes?
I don't want to do minutes. I think we're past our time. No, it's not 10:30 for the regular meeting, unless you want to, well, we did extend it. No, we should have the public comments. Are there other? Okay.
I withdraw the motion to extend the meeting, and I want to extend the meeting till 10:20.
Okay. All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay. So now we have public comments on something not on the agenda. Hearing and seeing none. I guess we do have minutes. Personally, I've not had an opportunity to read them, so I would prefer to defer the minutes. I've had guests, and we've been going down to New York City and visiting museums and everything else. Do we have any bonds? We have, okay. Any old business, Michelle? Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thanks for holding me to the.
No problem.